This recording is only going to be me looking at the camera, video, and just me talking, no music.
Okay.
Alright. The first demon that I'd like to introduce or share is titled Thing 1 and Thing 2. It all started in my apartment in Spokane Valley, in Sullivan Court Apartments, where I rented and had my red Honda Accord. I believe it was a 94 Honda Accord. And I was working for a startup company that was building a how-to website with a paywall on learning how to stage your home through tutorial videos, which I made through motion graphics. I was paid $18 an hour. I was doing pretty good. And that'll become relevant later. But at the time, I was also trying to make some extra income. But I was also living in Spokane Valley after living mostly in Utah. I had moved from Utah to Vermont to pursue a relationship that I was in. The gal that I had dated was going to school in Utah, but her original residence was in Vermont. So after some mishaps happened with her school, she decided to go from Utah back home to Vermont. And since we were in a relationship, I wasn't in school at the time. I had just met her. I decided to go with her. But that didn't end up working out after a year. And then I ended up moving in with my father, which was living with his mother, my grandma, at the time. So I moved in with them after I had experienced that. But, so then I had moved from there down to Cheney, worked Jimmy John's, worked other odd jobs, and also pursued a side hustle for my creative side, which was photography, video editing, music videos, websites, stuff like that. I pursued, and then I landed my client that I mentioned. The company was called House Tie, and I was the motion graphics, paid $18 an hour. Moved from Cheney to the Sullivan Court Apartments, and I was also trying to continue to make connections. As I was continuing to try to make connections, I had been approached by someone that also did photos and basically said, hey, there's this person that I know that needs a photographer, but I'm busy with a different job during that night. Would you like to take it? I said, yeah, sure. I'll go ahead and take it for you. He told me the Connect's name, told me where to meet him or where the event was. I said, okay, cool. Thank you so much. I went about my day, and by the event time, I had brought my camera. I was expecting to meet with someone. to speak about the details of the job. I was not sure if it was paid or not. And essentially, it wasn't paid. And since I was the new person that they would potentially be contacting more often, they wanted to do a trial run to see how well I would do under those circumstances. And I said, okay, that's perfectly reasonable. I'll go ahead and show you what I can do on this one, and then we can see if you'd like to continue to work together from then on. They're like, okay, great. Have fun. I'm like, okay, cool, thanks. Then, so after that night, I was then approached by that same person. They continued to, or they introduced themselves more so, and basically said, we have a team. I'm a manager of artists and would like to bring you on as basically our all-over creative person. And I thought, that must be a good opportunity. And I probably will get paid something eventually. If not right now, then I'll get paid eventually. So I said, after that they proposed that to me, I said, okay, cool, that's fine. And this person, her name is Alicia Beard, legally. Her alias is Riker. And I'm only saying their names because they've done wrong to me. They've slandered my name all over their social connections, which is a lot of people. And we're just going to go from there. So Riker had we had continued to work together very closely because of the proposal that I was the all-over creative. She brought in her artist, so I got to meet the artist that she was working with at the time. Now, this particular artist did not do any wrong to me, so I won't be mentioning their name. Riker basically said, hey, I have this artist, he's making some really, really great music, and we just need someone to produce the photos, videos, maybe do vlogs potentially, and then do websites and stuff like that. And I said, okay. And at that time, I wasn't very bullish about my pricing, so I didn't really ask them about price. I was still trying to figure out or navigate around the idea of even asking for something more than $100. I had formed my skill set very seasonedly, but the one skill set I did not season or even begin to touch was to ask about appropriate pricing. So at that time, I was like, okay, whatever we can do, because I don't have any paid clients right now, so whatever you guys can swing, please send it my way, otherwise that's fine. And then we just continued to work together. One thing led to another. This particular manager had lost their artist and was looking for a new one. At that point, I had already made photos. We're taking plenty of photos for this person. Made a few flyers for this person. I cannot remember if I made a website, but I did some significant work for this particular artist under Riker. The next artist that she ended up bringing in, again, I will not mention his name. I just continued, basically copy and pasted whatever you guys needed for whatever event, whatever developments we wanted to try, let's just do it, because your success is my success, was the attitude I had at that time. And with that, the work just continued to pile, and I continued to closely work with Riker more often. And it was almost like she reeled me in to be an apprentice of sorts. I was with her almost 24/7. I maybe had 5 hours at most a day, with rare exceptions, of where I'd have to myself. Otherwise, I would go home, sleep, wake up, drive my car to wherever they were at, and give rides, and basically act more of like a full-on team, with the exception of personal endeavors, including just going running an errand together, or going to an event that had no relation to the artist that we had at the time, and just learning how to make connections and be out and about, which it's the one thing that they succeeded in. I've become much more extroverted because of those extreme social situations that I was forced to be in. Now, where it started to rear its ugly head was when I got into a relationship. The state of affairs at that moment, I believe it was in 2016, may have been a little like the early, like January, February of 2016, where just a year before, Riker had lost the next artist that she had, and then started doing business with the next artist. And I will mention his name because he was a part of that state of affairs where they decided to do what they did. Riker picked up Django, or Elijah was his first name. I'm not certain if Wood was his last name, but if my memory served me correctly, Elijah Wood. Django, I had made logos for, did an album cover, did a full shoot, did a whole website, the whole nine for Django under Riker. And rewinding just a little bit, while Riker was still with the prior artist, I want to introduce another person that was a big part of all this. We were at Satellite late night one day, or before we went to Satellite, we were somewhere. Riker was introduced to someone that had extensive video knowledge, apparently, from what was being said, and was also part of the cannabis growing community. And I believe this was just a little bit before cannabis became legal. During this time, he then became, quickly, with no real question, quickly became part of our group, our working group together, with the artist, Riker, myself, and now this person. His alias that he goes by is Chili Mac. and his real name is Greg Wilson, or legal name. He, and I'll mention companies real quick, related companies as well. Riker, it has a company called Direct Influx Management, and Chili Mac has Mr. Max and Mr. Max Snacks. Mr. Max, I believe, was more of the, for lack of better terms, maybe connoisseur of the cannabis industry, sort of. It was like a high-end or branded high-end company for cannabis. And then Mr. Max Snacks was more of the lower end, but it was for edibles. During that time, right before the artist had left, I was working on labels, logos, graphics, websites for Chili Max cannabis brands, plural, 2. And in turn, he was supposed to teach me how to work with video. He did have a lot of equipment, not super professional. There wasn't a gimbal. There was a shoulder stabilizer. There's some lights, other basic equipment, and a camera that was similar to mine, but it was just a little better, that I had at the time. And basically, there was a running agreement that there would be some sort of return to the cannabis endeavor. We would brand, we would do all this branding, all this work to eventually pin out or get a percentage based off of the sales of the cannabis that they were selling, or were going to eventually sell because of cannabis newly becoming legal. Of which I never saw any return on. Despite all that work I ended up doing, never got any return. And as of today, which is January of 2023, they are still using all of the graphics, at least logos, all of the logos that I designed for them. They're still using all of them, even though I'm not even close to part of the group. But I actually try to avoid them because of what they ended up doing, which I'm getting to. But, so essentially, I now have Django, I now have Chili Mac, and I now have Riker. These were the 3 people, more specifically, that's why it's called Thing 1 and Thing 2, Riker and Chili Mac. They are the ones that initiated what I'm about to tell you. The state of affairs at that time were that I was to remain as a business asset or entity that basically had no feelings. And you'll understand what I mean by that. I eventually was trying to pursue personal needs in relationships of the opposite sex. And in that endeavor, I ended up finding or meeting someone that I had regrettably fallen in love with, which seeds into my other demon. This particular person that I had fallen in love with at the time posed a threat to the integrity and overall non-disclosure agreement that I had with this group I had been working with for a couple of years now. Mainly because I had company equipment, as they said, even though they weren't documented company equipment at the time. I didn't have to sign anything for them. I was just, either they had misplaced it with me, or it was mine. It was considered mine. Riker had left her iPad in my car. I put it in my bag. I went to go enjoy myself for the rest of the night. She stated she needed it now. Instead of me going out to give it to her, my girlfriend that I had fallen in love with at the time walked out with it and gave it to her, not knowing anything about either each other. And that led to the downward spiral of me eventually leaving the group. I left the group because Riker was basically saying that I could not have a relationship. Without saying it, she said a lot, basically alluding to, you cannot be in a relationship with her. If you are, then it's gonna pose a threat to our business dealings, and I can't have that. Basically, is what she was saying. And I'm like, okay. And through the arguments that we ended up having because of this conversation that Riker and I were having, I asked, or I basically said, one of my responses was, you can't tell me who I'm going to love or not. This is my emotions is not something that you get to play with. If I decide that I want to have a relationship with someone, that's my choice. You're not going to control me. And basically she would say, I'm not trying to control you, this, that, or the other, but would still revert back to the same argument. Eventually I was like, you know what? I've had enough of your crap anyway. I'm done. And then she's like, what do you mean you're done? And that eventually led to me I basically saying, because during that conversation that we were having, she kept drilling into me that there was still things that needed to be done. And it was like, okay, things need to get done, but I'm done. So what are you going to do about it? Because it's not my responsibility anymore. I'm done. It's like, no. She would say, no, you're not. This is not something you get to walk out on. Like, you need to finish your work. And then eventually it led to me saying, okay, fine, I'll finish it. And I only said that so that we could part ways. So I parted ways, and I continued to show resistance because I was not going to let her control me. And this resistance eventually led to a meeting that was a couple meetings. The last meeting we ever had was basically, okay. And basically they ended up saying, you need to return the equipment we gave you. Now, the equipment they gave me was a trade for the time that I had spent on all of the stuff that they had me do. All the websites, all the logos, all the graphics, all the everything, videos, all of it. Everything that I had made for them, they had given me the equipment that Chili Mac had as basically like a payment. It's like, okay, great, cool. That's what kept me sticking for another while longer, even though I was getting real sick of the relationship. And before that, we had a nice moment where Chili Mac had got a good amount of money to spread out through the group. I got a lump sum of whether it was $600 to $800, doesn't really matter. I was in the hole, like $300 at the bank or something like that, at my bank. And I was in the hole another $600 for my phone bill. I was not making money. And that eventually led to me quitting my job, losing my apartment, and then moving in with my dad, which had his own apartment at the time and was highly drugged, highly induced. Because my dad is bipolar manic depressive, he had a prior episode that landed him there. But it's another story for another time. Probably actually, honestly, will end up being probably end up being a third demon. But so they ended up paying me. So all that they gave me for all the work that I did was the $600 to $800 and the equipment. Right at this point. And as I was trying to leave the group peacefully and just say, let's just cut ties, call it good, no hard feelings. Either they said in the last meeting we had is that you need to return the equipment we gave you, or they ended up basically saying that you need to give the equipment back because we can't. We want it. I don't think they even really gave me. I don't think they ever gave me a reason. Basically, what it was is they weren't going to be able to do what they needed to do without either me or the equipment they gave me. So there's that. So they wanted it back. I said no because it was supposed to be payment. Because time is time. You can't get that time back. So might as well make some money while you're at it or get some equipment. And that led to them basically telling everyone that they knew on social media that I had stole the equipment. They were basically saying, if you see him, call the authorities and call the police and let them know that you've that you see me as a thief, basically. They wanted me to they just wanted the equipment back, bottom line, but they went to a very negative direction because I wouldn't give it back. The direction was telling everybody that I stole and basically slandering my business names at the time. I go by Jonathan, now I recently go by J Digital. And this has been a recent development that I don't know that they even know about. But I go by Jonathan. I used to go by Ginger. I used to go by... I still am trying to establish my company, KM Pro Designs. So everything that I used to go by, they basically said, don't trust this person. He's a thief, he's a liar, etc., etc. They called me a lot of names, and it may or may not have caused a lot of damage in the scene at the time, or just to people that knew him at the very least, and that trust him. Basically, so yeah, they just wanted their equipment back. They went to a very negative place to try to get it back, tried to scare me. But then, after all that stress and all that anxiety-inducing moments where I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to continue doing business in the same realms that I used to, because they would be there. And I didn't want them to take the equipment, and I also didn't want them to jump me and beat the crap out of me and go that route, which I don't doubt it's not sure whether they would or wouldn't at this point. So I didn't go anywhere. I didn't do any more work. I just did not want to create more of an issue for myself and for the people that I knew at the time, which was the relationship that I had got into, the girl that I fell in love with had a daughter, or has a daughter, and I was building a relationship with her daughter at that point in time too. So it just didn't, me going out and doing shoots was not on my priority list. Me staying indoors, staying home, finding a job and just working a job made a lot more sense, and that's what I ended up doing. I hopped around to multiple jobs, and I've steadied on a very good job right now, a lot better than all my other ones. I've been there for 3 years now, but that's how that went. Kind of hopping around the history a little bit, but after they had slandered my name, basically tried to get me arrested for stealing, which I didn't do. It's not like I broke into their car and stole all the equipment. I didn't do that. They gave it to me. I quit their group, and I took it as payment, and they wanted it back. That's exactly how it went down. The next stage, after it had been about a year, if not maybe more than a year, I decided to hop back into the scene and start doing content on my camera again and go out to events, because the second artist that I was acquainted with through Riker had reached back out to me and was doing a show. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna go support. I'm gonna go to his show, and then I'm gonna record him, because that's what we used to do. I did that. Apparently Riker had a connection inside, and they might have been outside or something, or they were in a connection pool, like, hey, if you see this person, let me know. But they ended up having someone that I didn't know serve me with court paperwork, which was under the whole theft and the business relationship that had gone sour. There were a few things on there that I would have been like, yeah, that makes sense. One of them was but then again, I was supposed to be making money. They were, one of the things that they also agreed to was to teach me how to do certain things, like be more social, and get me clients that I can get paid from. That was part of the agreement, which they didn't do, or they did very sparingly, which is why I was negative $300 at the bank and negative $600 in debt with my phone. And one of the items in the court paperwork that they eventually, during our court hearing, had mentioned that it was the bill for fellow co-working space, which was we were jointly paying for a space there. So that was one of the things that I was like, okay, that makes sense. But all the other, like the equipment, didn't make sense to me. I thought it was wrong that they would sue me at this point. And it was a 2012 at that time. So 2016 was about when I was, the summer of 2016, I believe. or it could have been 2015. But around that time, I was being sued and had a hearing for theft and breaking of agreements or something like that. Honestly, it doesn't really matter too much. But what happened in the hearing was I had never been in any court hearing for any reason up until that point. Not even through family members. Like, none of my family members or siblings got in trouble to that extent where we had to have a court hearing about it. I was never a part of any of my parents' family law dealings, because they rarely happened. And even then, I was probably too young when they did happen. But essentially, I had no idea what I was doing. And it was a small claims court hearing, which in small claims court, you don't get representation. You don't get an attorney. You represent yourself. And you're supposed to represent yourself. It's supposed to be you, your papers, your exhibits, and the judge. And what they had claimed is that there was a list of all the equipment. Again, so at that time, it was about 2016, maybe 2017. Probably in between that time at some point. And they had given me a 2012 MacBook Pro with 250 megabytes, I'm pretty sure, of storage. And that was a very small amount of storage for that kind of computer and doing the work that I was doing. Probably wasn't megabytes, it was probably gigabytes, but still, it's a very small amount of storage. I remember me having to carry around a terabyte external hard drive that I had bought. To unload the recordings and photos that I was taking. And the 2012 MacBook was maybe on the market worth $200, if that, maybe $150, and they priced it at about $1,000, which I thought was ridiculous. It made no sense. If it was orthodox or a regular thing that judges would look up prices on their phone, if that judge had looked it up on their phone right then and there, like used 2012 MacBook Pro, he probably would have seen anywhere from $150 to $300, but they priced it at almost $1,000. So it was a very, very overpriced item list. But they had listed everything out to $3,000 as total. And I lost my case. And I now owe small claims court about $3,000 because they were upset that they lost their equipment by giving it to me. Bottom line, and frankly, I saw through their bullshit. They didn't like it. They had just given all this equipment to me. I left. They wanted it back. I said no. And that's the route they took. So now I avoid Riker, Django, and Chili Mac as much as I can. I haven't seen Chili Mac since the hearing. And I've seen Riker a few times. I've seen Django a few times. Um, and all of that was a very manipulative realization for me. Like, I realized really quickly by the time the hearing had happened that I was fully manipulated. Like, I was lost. As I was working for them, I was acting like I was their slave, and I hated it. And I found myself in a hole that I couldn't get myself out of, which I thought was pretty stupid. I was very mad at myself. There were times where I was in my Honda and was, I'm almost certain my gas gauge kept going from mid-full to E or around there, and was close to E almost all the time, because I was driving them around. And it's just, I didn't like where I was. I would drive Riker to her home, drop her off, and drive home. And I thought about that day and how much I wanted to just be home and just have a moment where I could think for myself for once, and would yell at the top of my lungs in my vehicle like I was unhappy. I was mad. I didn't like where I was at. I had made no progress through that whole relationship that I had with Riker. No progress. Despite those little progressions, I took one step forward and took two steps back, or at least that's what it felt like. It was not good. I was not happy. Just all over a bad deal. So since they decided to slander me, I want to take a moment to say, do not do business with them. Now, with the caveat, unless you have writing, a signed document, and you hold them to their word, and they follow through with it, if they give you anything less of that, do not do business with them. Do not do anything with them. That was one of the most stressful times in my life. And anytime I see them, my heart races because I don't know what they're up to. They're obviously up to something very devious. And I just don't like them. I prefer transparency. I prefer honesty. I prefer good things, not what they did. And it makes me infuriated every time I have to think about what happened. It was a mistake working with them. Because I got paid close to nothing. If you think about the amount of work I did and the time that I did it and how much I was more or less an apprentice and drove them around and all that wear and tear and all of that, I was solely underpaid. Tremendously underpaid. And they ended up suing me. But anyway, that is the conclusion. There are other details. If you want to know more, comment down below. I'm happy to talk about it because I know the truth, because I value honesty. don't do business with Riker, Alicia Beard. Don't do business with Chili Mac, Greg Wilson, Mr. Max Snacks, or Jago. Don't do it. Unless you have a written document and you hold them to their word at every given moment. Because otherwise, if they have a moment to play you, they will. I highly doubt they've changed. That's just who they are. And Riker has told me once before that she enjoys manipulating people. So, if you are close-knit with Riker, I would take a few steps back. Try to think about what she's really trying to do with you. How your relationship with her benefits her. Think about it real hard. Because I'm pretty sure there's something there. Even if it's something as little as you being connected with somebody. That's her game. She loves to manipulate people. But that concludes Demon 1, Thing 1, and Thing 2.